Since Update 1 has been announced, we have been drip-fed a little information on the topic of what's coming to 1.0, and some of us have even been able to check out 1.0 in the beta access, and no doubt have been sworn to secrecy. Thankfully, I haven't, which means today I'm going to be covering why I think we're going to be seeing considerable changes in the early to mid-game of 1.0, and also when I think 1.0 will be released. But as fair warning, I do need to say that this is 90% speculation, with me just trying to connect the dots, so I could be completely wrong. So if you disagree with me, then let me know in the comments and we'll see. But first, let's talk about the node changes. Now, in the recent video that we covered, we had many people talking about how they disliked the removal and nerfs of a lot of the pure nodes, with a fair amount of you pointing out that it'll mean a lot more work to get enough resources to run our factories, and you're absolutely right. As such, one change that we can expect is a much deeper focus on building logistic networks to collect and distribute resources from multiple lower tier nodes from across the map. And we know that the team have already considered this, thanks to them making trains and trucks available earlier in the game for us. But why so many impure and normal nodes? Well, this could be down to the Mark III miner fix, and though we don't know what the fix is, it would be easy to assume that there is an increase in belt speed, or Mark III miners may have two outputs. But what if this isn't the case? Perhaps we'll be able to use something like short-range teleporters, which need a rare item in order to build, in which case we'd be limited by those items, such as Mercer Spheres or Summer Sleep. Now, if so, having huge swathes of pure nodes means we won't actually be able to utilize every node fully, in which case more normal or impure nodes balance this out. And it's important to note that despite these changes, the net gain for all the resources is up almost across the board. The other option is potentially a nerf to the resource yield either of the miners or the nodes themselves. For example, a Mark I miner may only produce 20 ore on an impure node, 40 from a normal and 80 from a pure node, making Mark III miners on a pure nodes produce a maximum of 800 items per minute, which is just shy of the 780 max throughput we currently have. Or perhaps upgrading a miner will not double the production but increase by a lower percentage point, such as 50% increase over the previous level. In which case this would mean that a Mark II miner on a pure node would produce 180 resources rather than 240, and a Mark III miner would produce 270, meaning a max output of 675 ore per minute if it's fully overclocked. Now again, I do have to stress this is just me speculating here, but something to bear in mind nonetheless. Now, moving on from the resources and resource nodes, I believe we may see ourselves spending more time in the early game, and there are a few reasons that point to this. Firstly, if I remember rightly, I could be mistaken here, Jay said in a live stream a long time ago now that the current space elevator tiers are placeholders for 1.0, giving us something to work towards during the early access period. And as such, 1.0 would mean potential changes in the amount that you need to produce, or maybe even another space elevator tier. If so, we'll either have to spend more time producing resources in the early game, or at the very least, the end game will take longer. Another point suggesting a big change to the early game are the power changes. Now, have you noticed that at every stage of power, we have seen an incredible buff, at least up until nuclear power so far? This started with the introduction of automated biomass burners, and though it's something the community has wanted for a long time, Coffee Stain were adamant that manual biomass burners were right for the early game, as they forced you to push towards coal power and expanding your factory and automating rather than relying solely on biomass. Now, perhaps automated biomass burners is just a crowd pleaser. But if they were so sure that it was right throughout the whole of the early access period, then what's changed now? Compounding on this idea as well is also the introduction of a lot more coal. The argument for this was to allow increased steel production, but for the majority of players, sulfur or caterium tend to be the resources that we run out of first, not steel. Of course, the extra coal does mean that we can build larger coal power, whilst we wait to unlock fuel generators. It's also wise to note that we have a lot more nodes for geothermal generators as well, and they'll be slightly easier to produce now as they are not requiring supercomputers, making them available earlier in the game. And then of course there is the fuel generators, which after clarifying in the dev stream, will see us needing to place less generators by increasing the total output of generators by 66%. This means fuel doesn't increase the efficacy, but it does mean that you'll need to place less generators for more power. But building generators will be available earlier in the game, and given we have more sulfur and coal available, it means that we can, should we wish, produce more turbo fuel. Unless you plan on using the sulfur for batteries, that is. All these power changes make producing large amounts of power easier in the early to mid game, which suggests to me either we're going to be needing more power, perhaps thanks to new machines being more power intensive, or we're going to be spending more time building larger factories in the early game. Now that's my 2 cents on the changes so far, but these changes also mean a lot in terms of the best starting positions, which I will cover in a future video. And I'll release that either after they've covered the changes to alternate recipes or when they announce new resource nodes, as I'm still expecting some new types of gas, and I'd love to hear more about the SAM ore, but of course we're going to be waiting until 1.0 for that. Now, you're probably wondering, when will 1.0 be released? That's the question on everyone's lips at the moment. Now, given they've no doubt been going over the beta feedback and they've been making changes consequently from that, I've heard a lot of people say the game will be ready soon after Coffee Stain come back from their summer break in July, meaning around August time. And though it could be the case, I believe that not to be true. Firstly, Snut has reassured us that we're going to know in advance. Now I'm betting we'll know either 1 month or 6 weeks ahead of the release date at a minimum. There's also very little information about 1.0, and normally we see an influx in teasers to break down prior to a major update. And though they've started, I do think that 1.0 will see a lot of changes for the game. And as such, I'm hoping that we're going to see a lot more teasers hyping up the release prior for us to break down. And I've also just been watching the dev stream, and they mentioned that they will both be on holiday over the next couple of weeks, I think after the summer break. So it could be that we have to wait a little bit longer, because it doesn't make sense releasing a game when your community managers are off on vacation. Furthering my belief that it won't be prior to Q4 is competition in the factory game niche. Now, though we've seen a considerable amount of factory games come to the market in the last 5 years, there is one game that is synonymous with factory gaming as much, if not more so, than Satisfactory, and that is obviously Factorio. Now, we know they've been working on the Space Age DLC, but also Factorio 2.0, which is the free update to all Factorio players, which will be out at the same time, and this will no doubt bring a lot of players back to the game. Now, if Satisfactory want to make the biggest splash in the factory gaming space, it makes sense not to release the game at the same time as another big game, no matter how different the style may be. And though we don't have a definite release date for Factorio's update, it's suggested that it will come in August, and a recent interview with one of the devs announced that the latest they will release the update is by October. If so, I'm guessing Satisfactory will try to release the game slightly later. However, I believe, given the sweeping statement that most Satisfactory players are above the age of 25, according to my channel's analytics at least, a December release would probably harm the potential of new game sales, as a fair portion of the players will be family members trying to cater for their family over Christmas, and we're all struck for cash then. This leads me to believe, though, that November could be the sweet spot for them, as people will have slightly more disposable income. Also, for those typing, everyone already owns the game who wants it for 1.0, I've actually seen regularly people coming into my comments saying that they're waiting for 1.0 to buy the game. So from a business point of view, this is probably a good time frame for them as well. And November being the planned release is backed up by the history of Satisfactory's most recent updates. And if you look at them, we can see a pattern to the updates releases. So Update 5 was released at the end of October, then Update 6 was in June, followed by Update 7 in mid-November. And then we had Update 8 to experimental again in June, followed by Update 8 to early access in November. This suggests to me that they try to release the updates either in June or mid Q4 where possible. And as we've just missed June, I'm under the impression it will come out either at the end of October or November based on this. Personally, I'm rooting for early to mid-November, though I know a lot of the community can't wait to see it sooner. Either way though, we'll have to wait and see. All right, hold up. I've just finished editing this video and Snut's kind of thrown us a bit of a curveball, and that has kind of thrown my speculation out of the window. So in the recent video, Snut goes on to mention that they're increasing the price of the game. And the reason that they're doing this now is unfortunately due to some rules that Epic Games Store and Steam have about changing the price of the game. Now, I've done a little bit of snooping into these rules, and neither Epic Games nor Steam have a problem with you changing the price at any time. But there is one big clause. So if you want to run a sale, such as, you know, for 1.0 launch, which you may well want to, then there needs to be a 30-day cooldown period between raising prices and offering a discount, which could mean that Satisfactory will be hitting 1.0 soon. And we can speculate if the summer sale ends on the 11th of July, we could see the price going up immediately to $39.99, and then 30 days following see Satisfactory 1.0, which could mean a release date of mid-August at the earliest for Satisfactory 1.0. But what do you think? Will it be November or will it be August? It seems like they're trying to push this out sooner and need to make these changes immediately so they can get the game out. So I'm thinking it could now be August, which is scary close. And before I finish, I did want to say a thank you to Mickey, who suggested I have a look at the Steam rules for sales, and without which I wouldn't have come to this. So thank you very much. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And whilst you're waiting for 1.0, why not check out my top factory games coming next here. Of course, special thanks does go to all of our amazing supporters on Patreon, most notably our Totalxclipse patron Firefless, as well as our Lunas, the Calamity, Ben, and Star, and our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Papa Snoozy. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.